Marcus Thompson woke up early that morning. The kind of early where the streets are still quiet and the sun is just beginning its slow climb into the sky. He had been dreading this day for weeks. A small parking ticket he had forgotten about had turned into a court summons, and now he found himself walking through the cold, echoing halls of the courthouse. Marcus wasn't a man who spent much time in places like this. He worked long hours at his mechanic shop, fixing cars for people who depended on them to get to work or take their kids to school. He didn't have time for drama or courts. The courtroom was packed when Marcus arrived, filled with people waiting for their cases to be called. Some looked nervous, others bored, but everyone shared the same uneasy energy. Marcus took a seat near the back, clutching the folder he'd brought with him. Inside were copies of documents showing proof of payment for the ticket. He thought it would be enough to clear things up quickly. After all, it was just a misunderstanding. How bad could it really be? When the bailiff finally called his name, Marcus stood up and walked toward the front of the room. His shoes squeaked against the polished floor, drawing more attention than he wanted. Standing before Judge Richard Holloway felt strange, almost surreal. The judge sat high above everyone else, his face stern and unreadable behind thick glasses. There was something intimidating about the way he carried himself, like he believed he was untouchable. "Mr. Thompson," the judge began, glancing briefly at the file in front of him. "You're here regarding an unpaid parking violation. Care to explain yourself?" Marcus cleared his throat, trying to steady his voice. "Yes, Your Honor. I actually paid the ticket, but I think there might have been some kind of mix-up. I have the receipt right here." Before Marcus could finish, the judge cut him off. "Receipt?" Judge Holloway repeated, leaning back in his chair. His tone dripped with sarcasm. "Do you expect me to believe that someone like you keeps proper records? Most people in your position wouldn't even bother." The words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. Someone like you. What did that mean? Did the judge think less of him because of how he dressed, because of the color of his skin? Marcus felt heat rising in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. Losing his temper wouldn't help anything. "I assure you, Your Honor, I do keep records," Marcus replied politely, holding out the folder. "If you'll just take a moment to look at these." Again, the judge interrupted. This time, his voice grew louder, sharper. "Oh, don't waste my time with excuses. People, like you always have excuses. You probably parked illegally because you figured no one would care anyway. Am I right?" The courtroom went silent. Every eye in the room was on Marcus, waiting to see how he would respond. Even the court clerk stopped typing mid-sentence, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Marcus felt exposed, like he was standing under a spotlight while the rest of the world judged him. He clenched his fists tightly at his sides, nails digging into his palms. Deep down, he knew arguing back wouldn't change anything. But the anger simmering inside him was hard to ignore. "Your Honor," Marcus said slowly, choosing each word carefully. "I came here today to resolve this issue respectfully. I've done nothing wrong, and I'm happy to provide whatever documentation you need." Judge Holloway smirked, clearly unimpressed. "Respectfully? That's rich coming from someone who can't even follow basic rules. Tell me, Mr. Thompson, what exactly do you do for a living? Something honest, I hope." The question stung, not because it was rude, but because it implied Marcus couldn't be trusted. For years, Marcus had worked tirelessly to build a reputation as a reliable, hard-working man. He took pride in his job, in providing for his family and doing things the right way. And yet here was this man, this supposed authority figure, dismissing him as if none of that mattered. "I own a mechanic shop," Marcus answered evenly, refusing to let his emotions show. "I fix cars for people every day. Honest work, just like you asked." For a brief second, the judge seemed surprised. Maybe he hadn't expected such a straightforward answer. But then his expression hardened again, and he waved Marcus off dismissively. "Fine. Let's see those papers of yours, though I doubt they'll make much difference." As Marcus handed over the folder, he couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was happening here. It wasn't just about a parking ticket anymore. The judge's comments weren't accidental. They were calculated, designed to make Marcus feel small and insignificant. Yet Marcus refused to let them break him. He reminded himself why he was there: to set the record straight, to prove that he deserved respect just like anyone else. Little did Marcus know. The events unfolding in that courtroom were about to take a turn nobody could have predicted. While the tension between him and the judge simmered, forces outside the room were already in motion. Somewhere wheels were turning, and within minutes, the entire dynamic of the courtroom, and perhaps Marcus's life, would change forever. But, for now, Marcus stood tall, determined not to let the weight of the judge's words crush him. Whatever came next, he vowed to face it head-on. The tension in the courtroom was thick enough to cut with a knife. Marcus stood frozen, his folder of documents now resting on the judge's bench, completely ignored. Judge Holloway leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, as if he had already made up his mind about Marcus without even looking at the evidence. The silence stretched out like an endless road, broken only by the faint hum of the fluorescent lights above. Everyone in the room seemed to be holding their breath, waiting for what would happen next, and then it came, a sound that shattered the stillness. The heavy wooden doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with a loud creak, echoing through the space like thunder. Every head turned toward the entrance, including Marcus's and the judge's. Two figures walked in, both dressed sharply, in dark suits. Their polished shoes clicked against the tiled floor with each step, announcing their presence with authority. They moved with purpose, radiating confidence and control. One of them, a woman with sharp features and piercing eyes, held up a badge. FBI, she announced firmly, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. Special Agents Carter and Ramirez. The entire room erupted into murmurs. People shifted in their seats, craning their necks to get a better look at the unexpected visitors. Even the court clerk stopped typing altogether, her hands hovering over the keyboard as if unsure whether to continue or not. Marcus blinked, momentarily forgetting the weight of the situation he was in. What were federal agents doing here? Was this some kind of mistake? Judge Holloway, however, didn't seem fazed, at least not at first. He adjusted his glasses and leaned forward slightly, his expression neutral but tinged with annoyance. "This is highly irregular," he said, his tone clipped. "What is the meaning of this intrusion?" Agent Carter stepped closer to the judge's bench, her movements deliberate and measured. She carried herself with an air of calm authority, the kind that demanded respect without needing to ask for it. "We're here regarding an ongoing investigation into allegations of judicial misconduct," she explained, her voice steady and clear. "Specifically your conduct, Judge Holloway." The words landed like a bomb. Murmurs turned into gasps as the people in the gallery processed what they'd just heard. Judicial misconduct? Against this judge? Marcus felt his stomach drop. He glanced around the room, trying to gauge everyone else's reactions. Some looked shocked, others intrigued, and a few even appeared satisfied, as though they'd suspected something was off about the judge all along. Judge Holloway's face reddened, his composure cracking ever so slightly. "This is absurd," he snapped, slamming his hand on the desk. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Whatever accusations you've concocted are baseless." Agent Ramirez, who had been standing quietly beside his partner, finally spoke. Up. His voice was softer than Carter's but carried an unmistakable edge. "Baseless? That remains to be seen." He held out a sealed envelope. "Here's a warrant authorizing us to install surveillance equipment in your chambers. And," he paused, letting the moment hang in the air, "we also have preliminary evidence linking you to multiple cases of bribery and favoritism." The room fell silent again, except for the sound of Judge Holloway tearing open the envelope. His hands trembled slightly as he pulled out the document inside. As he read it, his face went pale, the color draining away as if someone had flipped a switch. For the first time since Marcus had entered the courtroom, the judge looked genuinely rattled. Marcus watched the scene unfold with a mix of disbelief and awe. Just moments ago, he had been the target of the judge's venomous comments. Now the tables had turned in a way he could never have imagined. He wanted to feel triumphant, to revel in the fact that the man who had insulted him was being called out for wrongdoing. But instead he felt a strange sense of unease. Something about this whole situation didn't add up. Why had the FBI shown up today of all days? How did they know to come now? As if sensing his thoughts, Agent Carter turned her attention to Marcus. Her gaze softened slightly, though she remained professional. "Mr. Thompson," she said, addressing him directly, "you may not realize it, but your case has played a significant role in our investigation." Marcus blinked, caught off guard. "My case?" he stammered. "But I'm just here for a parking ticket." Agent Ramirez nodded. "That's true. However, recent developments suggest that your treatment today is consistent with patterns we've observed in other cases involving this judge. Discrimination, bias, and outright hostility toward individuals based on socioeconomic status, and sometimes race, are among the behaviors we've documented." The words hit Marcus like a tidal wave. He hadn't thought too deeply about why the judge had treated him the way he did. He'd assumed it was just the man's personality. But hearing it described as part of a larger pattern made him angry. Not just for himself, but for anyone else who might have suffered under the same unfair treatment. Meanwhile, Judge Holloway had recovered enough to protest. "This is outrageous," he barked, standing up from his chair. "You can't just waltz in here and accuse me of corruption based on hearsay." Agent Carter raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Hearsay? Hardly. We've had surveillance equipment installed in your chambers for weeks. Videos, audio recordings, financial transactions, all pointing to serious ethical violations. You've been accepting bribes from wealthy defendants in exchange for lenient sentences, haven't you, Judge?" "Holloway?" The accusation hung in the air like smoke. The judge opened his mouth to deny it, but nothing came out. Instead, he sank back into his chair, defeated. It was clear to everyone in the room that the game was over. Whatever power and authority Judge Holloway had wielded before was crumbling right before their eyes. For Marcus, the moment was surreal. He had walked into the courtroom expecting to deal with a minor traffic violation. Instead, he found himself at the center of something far greater, an exposé that could shake the foundations of the local justice system. As the FBI agents continued, explaining the scope of their investigation, Marcus couldn't help but wonder, who had tipped them off? How had they gathered so much evidence? And most importantly, what would happen next? Little did Marcus know. The answers to those questions were closer than he realized. Back at FBI headquarters, files were being reviewed, connections were being drawn, and one brave individual's actions were about to shine a light on the truth. For now, though, Marcus simply stood there, watching as the man who had tried to belittle him squirmed under the weight of his own misdeeds. Justice, it seemed, had arrived in the most unexpected way. After the dramatic scene in the courtroom, Marcus was asked to step outside with Agents Carter and Ramirez. The hallway outside was quieter, though the buzz of murmurs from the gallery inside could still be heard faintly through the closed doors. Marcus felt a mix of emotions, relief that the judge's behavior had been exposed, confusion about how he fit into the bigger picture, and a growing sense of curiosity about what exactly the FBI had uncovered. As he followed the agents down the corridor to a small conference room, his mind raced with questions. Once they were seated, Agent Carter leaned forward, her expression serious but kind. "Mr. Thompson," she began, "we know this has been an overwhelming experience for you, but we want to explain why your case is significant and how it ties into our investigation." Marcus nodded slowly, still trying to process everything. "I don't understand," he admitted. "I thought this was just about a parking ticket. How does any of this involve me?" Agent Ramirez took over, his tone calm and measured. "It starts with patterns, Mr. Thompson. Over the past several months, we've been investigating Judge Holloway based on anonymous tips alleging corruption and discriminatory practices. We've gathered evidence showing that he accepts bribes from wealthy defendants in exchange for favorable rulings. But there's more. He also targets individuals like you, people who are less fortunate, who might not have the resources or connections to fight back." Marcus frowned, absorbing the information. "You mean he goes after people because of where they come from? Because of their background?" "Exactly," Agent Carter confirmed. "And unfortunately, your interaction with him today fits right into that pattern. When we reviewed recent cases involving the judge, we noticed disturbing trend. Individuals from marginalized communities often received harsher treatment compared to others facing similar charges. Your case caught our attention because it highlighted not only his bias but also his blatant disregard for fairness. Marcus sat back in his chair, stunned. He had suspected the judge's comments were unfair, but hearing them described as part of a systematic issue made him feel both angry and powerless. "But how did you even know to show up today?" he asked. "Did someone tell you I'd be treated badly?" The agents exchanged a glance before Agent Carter continued. "Not directly, no. What happened today was actually part of a broader surveillance operation. For weeks, we've had cameras and audio recorders placed in Judge Holloway's chambers. They've captured countless instances of misconduct, including conversations about bribes and discriminatory remarks during private meetings. When we saw the live feed of your hearing earlier and heard the way he spoke to you, we decided to act immediately." Marcus's eyes widened. "So, you were watching everything?" "Yes," Agent Ramirez said. "We needed concrete evidence to build our case against him, and while we didn't anticipate such blatant disrespect during your hearing, it reinforced what we already knew, that his behavior wasn't isolated. It's systemic." As Marcus processed this, another question came to mind. What happens now? To him, I mean. And to my case? Agent Carter smiled reassuringly. "Judge Holloway will face legal consequences for his actions. The evidence we've collected is substantial enough to warrant criminal charges, and he'll likely be suspended, pending trial. As for your case, we'll make sure it's resolved fairly. You won't face penalties for something that wasn't your fault." Though relieved, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. "There's one thing I still don't get," he said hesitantly. "Who tipped you off in the first place? Someone must have known what was going on to start this whole investigation." The agents hesitated briefly before Agent Carter replied. "That's where things get interesting. Our initial tip came anonymously. A series of emails sent to the Bureau detailing suspicious activities involving Judge Holloway. At first, we weren't sure how credible the claims were, but the details provided matched records we later obtained, independently. Then a few weeks ago, we received additional evidence from someone close to you." "Close to me?" Marcus echoed, surprised. "Who?" Before the agents could answer, Agent Ramirez pulled out a folder and slid it across the table toward Marcus. Inside were screenshots of text messages, emails, and even audio recordings. Marcus scanned them quickly, his heart skipping a beat when he recognized the voice in one of the clips. It was Lisa Monroe, a co-worker from his mechanic shop. "Lisa?" Marcus exclaimed, looking up at the agents. "She's the one who helped expose him?" "She played a crucial role," Agent Carter confirmed. "From what we understand, Lisa witnessed Judge Holloway's mistreatment of you during a previous court appearance. She secretly recorded parts of the hearing using her phone and sent the footage to us along with detailed notes about other questionable behaviors she'd observed. Her bravery gave us the final piece of evidence we needed to move forward." Marcus felt a lump rise in his throat. He had always known Lisa as a quiet, hard-working woman who kept mostly to herself. He never imagined she'd go to such lengths to stand up for him, or anyone else for that matter. "I had no idea," he murmured, shaking his head in disbelief. "She never said anything to me." "That's because she wanted to protect you," Agent Ramirez explained. "She believed speaking out could put you in danger if the judge found out. So she took matters into her own hands, trusting that we'd handle the situation responsibly." As the reality sank in, Marcus felt a surge of gratitude and guilt. Gratitude for Lisa's courage, and guilt for not realizing sooner that someone had been fighting for him behind the scenes. "Does she know what happened today?" he asked. "Does she know the judge got caught?" Agent Carter nodded. "We informed her shortly after arriving at the courthouse. She's safe and her identity will remain confidential until the investigation concludes. But rest assured, she's aware of the impact her actions have had, not just for you, but potentially for many others affected by Judge Holloway's misconduct." For a moment, Marcus sat silently, letting everything sink in. The weight of the situation, the injustice, the exposure, the unexpected heroism, was almost too much to comprehend. Yet amidst the chaos, he felt a glimmer of hope. If someone, like Lisa, could step up and make a difference, then maybe he could too. Maybe this experience wasn't just about clearing his name. Maybe it was about shining a light on a broken system and inspiring others to demand change. When the agents finally stood to leave, they handed Marcus a card with their contact information. "If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out," Agent Carter said warmly. "And thank you for your patience throughout this process. People like you remind us why we do what we do." As Marcus watched them walk away, he realized that his journey was far from over. The arrest of Judge Holloway was a victory, yes, but it was also a call to action. For years, Marcus had focused solely on his work, keeping his head down and avoiding trouble. Now he understood that staying silent in the face of injustice only allowed it to persist. If true change was going to happen, it would take more than brave whistleblowers like Lisa. It would take everyone willing to speak up, to stand together, and to fight for what was right. With newfound determination, Marcus resolved to honor Lisa's courage by doing the same. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he vowed to face them head-on, knowing that even the smallest acts of resistance could ripple outward and create waves of change. The next day, Marcus found himself sitting across from Lisa Monroe in a quiet corner of the mechanic shop where they both worked. The morning sun streamed through the large garage windows, casting golden beams on the floor and highlighting the grease-stained tools scattered around them. It was an ordinary setting for an extraordinary conversation. Lisa sat with her hands clasped tightly in her lap, looking nervous but resolute. She had always been a quiet presence at the shop, someone who kept to herself and focused on her work. But now, as Marcus looked at her, he saw her in a completely different light. "Lisa," Marcus began, his voice soft but filled with gratitude. "I don't even know where to start. Thank you doesn't feel like enough." Lisa gave him a small, shy smile. "You don't have to thank me, Marcus. I just did what I thought was right." Marcus shook his head, leaning forward slightly. "No, you didn't just do what was right. You risked everything for me, for people you didn't even know. That takes guts. Real guts." Lisa shrugged modestly, though her cheeks flushed with a hint of pride. "It wasn't about being brave or anything like that. When I saw how Judge Holloway treated you during that first hearing, it made me so mad. And then when I heard him say those things again yesterday, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Nobody should have to go through that." Marcus nodded slowly, remembering the sting of the judge's words. "Still, most people would have walked away. They wouldn't have stuck their necks out like you did. How did you even think to record him?" Lisa hesitated for a moment, glancing down at her hands before meeting Marcus's gaze. "Honestly, it was kind of an accident at first. I brought my phone into the courtroom because I wanted to take notes. I figured if something went wrong, I'd need proof. But when I heard the way he talked to you, I realized this wasn't just about one bad day in court. It was bigger than that. So I started recording. At first, I wasn't sure what to do with the footage, but after thinking about it for days, I decided to send it to the FBI. I didn't know if they'd take it seriously, but I figured it was worth a shot." Marcus listened intently, marveling at Lisa's determination. "And you never told me any of this? Not once?" "I wanted to," Lisa admitted. "But I was scared, not just for myself, but for you too. What if the judge found out, or what if my evidence wasn't enough? I didn't want to put anyone in danger until I knew for sure something could be done." Her honesty struck a chord with Marcus. He understood her reasoning, but part of him wished she had trusted him enough to share her plan earlier. Still, he couldn't fault her for wanting to protect him. "Well, whatever your reasons were, it worked," he said finally. "Because of you, that judge is going to face consequences for what he's done, and not just for me, for everyone he's ever mistreated." Lisa's expression softened, and she reached out to place a reassuring hand on Marcus's arm. "That's all I wanted. Justice isn't supposed to pick favorites, it's supposed to be fair for everyone. If I can help make that happen, even in a small way, then it's worth it." As they sat there talking, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. Lisa's actions weren't just about exposing corruption. They were about standing up for what was right, no matter how daunting the challenge might seem. Her courage inspired him to think bigger, to consider ways he could contribute to creating change beyond his own life. Later that afternoon, Marcus met with agents Carter and Ramirez again, this time at a local cafe. The agents had invited him to discuss the next steps in the investigation and to express their appreciation for his cooperation. Over cups of steaming coffee, they delved deeper into the details of the case, explaining how Lisa's recordings had provided critical context for their operation. "Your coworker's contribution can't be overstated," Agent Carter said, stirring sugar into her coffee. "Not only did her recordings confirm our suspicions, but they also gave us insight into the emotional toll Judge Holloway's behavior takes on his victims. That's powerful stuff. It humanizes the data we've collected." Agent Ramirez nodded in agreement. "People connect with stories more than statistics. Lisa's evidence paints a vivid picture of the harm caused by judicial misconduct. It'll play a key role in building public support for reform." Marcus sipped his coffee thoughtfully, absorbing their words. "So what happens now? To Judge Holloway, I mean." "He's facing federal charges related to bribery, corruption, and abuse of power," Agent Ramirez explained. "Once the trial begins, we'll present all the evidence we've gathered, including Lisa's recordings. Depending on the outcome, he could lose his position permanently and serve prison time." "And what about other judges?" Marcus asked. "Do you think this will lead to changes in the system as a whole?" "It's hard to say for sure," Agent Carter replied. "But high-profile cases like this often spark conversations about accountability and transparency within the justice system. We're hopeful that Judge Holloway's downfall will encourage others to come forward with similar stories. The more people speak up, the harder it becomes for these kinds of abuses to continue unchecked." As the conversation continued, Marcus found himself reflecting on the broader implications of the case. This wasn't just about one corrupt judge, it was about addressing systemic issues that allowed such behavior to thrive in the first place. He thought about all the individuals who had likely suffered under Judge Holloway's bias without ever knowing they had options for recourse. If nothing else, this experience underscored the importance of advocacy and education. Before leaving the cafe, Marcus turned to the agents with a determined look. "If there's anything I can do to help, whether it's speaking publicly about my experience or working with organizations to raise awareness, I'm in. I owe it to Lisa and to everyone else who's been treated unfairly." Agent Carter smiled warmly. "We appreciate that, Marcus. Your voice matters. Together we can push for meaningful change." By the end of the day, Marcus felt a mix of emotions: gratitude for Lisa's bravery, anger at the injustices exposed, and hope for a better future. As he drove home, he replayed the events of the past few days in his mind, realizing how much they had transformed him. What had started as a mundane trip to court over a parking ticket had spiraled into something far greater: a chance to fight for justice, not just for himself, but for countless others who deserved fairness and dignity. For the first time in years, Marcus felt truly empowered. With Lisa by his side and newfound allies in the FBI, he was ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. After all, if one person's courage could bring down a corrupt judge, imagine what a united effort could achieve. In the weeks following the dramatic events at the courthouse, Marcus Thompson became something of a local celebrity. News outlets picked up the story, and his name was splashed across headlines alongside words like justice, courage, and accountability. At first, Marcus felt uncomfortable with the attention. He wasn't used to being in the spotlight, and he worried that people might misunderstand his role in the case. But as interviews rolled in and community leaders began reaching out to him, Marcus realized this newfound visibility came with an opportunity, one he couldn't afford to waste. One evening, Marcus stood behind a podium at a community center packed with people. The room buzzed with energy, filled with activists, lawyers, students, and ordinary citizens eager to hear what he had to say. A sea of faces looked up at him expectantly, their eyes reflecting hope, frustration, and determination. Taking a deep breath, Marcus adjusted the microphone and began to speak. 2 months ago, he started, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. I walked into a courtroom expecting to deal with a parking ticket. Instead, I walked out knowing I'd witnessed something much bigger, a system designed to favor some while crushing others. What happened to me wasn't unique, it was part of a pattern. And thanks to brave individuals like Lisa Monroe and organizations like the FBI, we're finally starting to see cracks in that system. The crowd erupted into applause, but Marcus held up a hand to quiet them. This isn't just about me, or Judge Holloway. It's about every person who's ever felt powerless in the face of injustice. It's about every voice that's been silenced because speaking up seemed impossible. Today we're here to remind ourselves and each other that change is possible when we stand together. As Marcus continued, he shared his story in detail. The humiliation he'd felt under Judge Holloway's insults, the shock of seeing the FBI walk into the courtroom, and the pride he felt when he learned about Lisa's bravery. He spoke candidly about the anger and frustration that had fueled his desire to act, but also about the hope that kept him moving forward. By the time he finished, the room was electric with inspiration. After the speech, Marcus was approached by a group of civil rights advocates who invited him to join their efforts to reform the judicial system. They proposed launching a community initiative aimed at educating people about their legal rights and encouraging witnesses of misconduct to come forward. Marcus immediately agreed, knowing this was exactly what he wanted to do next. Together, they formed a coalition called Voices for Justice, dedicated to amplifying marginalized voices and holding institutions accountable. Lisa, too, became actively involved in the movement. Though she remained soft-spoken and reserved, her actions spoke volumes. She worked tirelessly behind the scenes, helping organize workshops, distributing informational materials, and mentoring others who were hesitant to report wrongdoing. Her quiet strength inspired many, including Marcus, who often referred to her as the backbone of everything we're doing. Through Voices for Justice, Marcus and Lisa traveled to schools, churches, and community centers, sharing their experiences and urging others to take action. Their message was simple yet powerful. No one should have to face injustice alone. During these events, Lisa would sometimes play excerpts from the recordings she'd made in Judge Holloway's courtroom. Hearing those clips always sparked intense reactions, gasps of disbelief, murmurs of outrage, and even tears. But more importantly, it motivated people to believe that standing up could make a difference. Meanwhile, Judge Richard Holloway's trial dominated the news cycle. Evidence presented during the proceedings painted a damning picture of his misconduct. Records of secret bank transfers tied to wealthy defendants, video footage of discriminatory remarks made during private hearings, and testimonies from victims of his bias all contributed to the mounting case against him. When the verdict was finally announced, guilty on multiple counts of corruption, bribery, and abuse of power, the courtroom erupted in cheers. For many, it was a long overdue victory. But Marcus knew the fight wasn't over. While Judge Holloway's conviction sent a strong message, it was only the beginning of a larger conversation about systemic reform. In response, Voices for Justice launched a campaign calling for stricter oversight of judges, mandatory ethics training, and independent review boards to investigate complaints of misconduct. The initiative gained significant traction, drawing support from lawmakers, advocacy groups, and everyday citizens alike. At the heart of the movement was a growing sense of unity. People from all walks of life came together, united by a shared belief in fairness and equality. Marcus and Lisa found themselves surrounded by allies, people who had once felt powerless, but now saw themselves as agents of change. Whether it was a single mother advocating for better representation in family court, or a college student organizing protests against racial profiling, everyone played a role in reshaping the narrative. As months turned into years, the impact of their work became undeniable. New policies were implemented to increase transparency within the judicial system, and public awareness campaigns helped demystify legal processes for ordinary citizens. More importantly, individuals who might have stayed silent before now felt empowered to speak out. Stories poured in from across the country of mistreated defendants receiving justice, of whistleblowers exposing corruption, and of communities rallying around causes that mattered most to them. For Marcus, the journey was transformative. He went from being a mechanic focused solely on his work to becoming a symbol of resilience and advocacy. Yet despite the accolades and recognition, he never lost sight of why he started this fight in the first place. Every time he stood before a crowd or met someone whose life had been changed by their efforts, he thought back to that fateful day in the courtroom. He remembered the sting of Judge Holloway's words and the weight of feeling powerless. And he reminded himself that courage wasn't about never being afraid. It was about acting despite fear. Lisa, too, grew into her role as an advocate. Over time, she became more comfortable stepping into the spotlight, using her story to inspire others. She often told audiences, "Change starts small. Sometimes it's just pressing record on your phone. Other times it's deciding to send an email or make a call. What matters is that you do something. Because when enough people take that step, the world begins to shift." Together, Marcus and Lisa proved that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things. Their partnership, a blend of quiet determination and bold action, became a model for others to follow. Through their efforts, they didn't just bring down a corrupt judge. They ignited a movement that reached far beyond the walls of a single courtroom. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Marcus and Lisa stood side by side at a rally in downtown Chicago. Thousands of people gathered in the square, holding signs and chanting slogans about justice and accountability. As Marcus looked out at the sea of faces, he felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for Lisa, but for everyone who had joined the cause. "We've come so far," Lisa said softly, breaking his reverie. "But there's still so much to do." Marcus nodded, smiling. "Yeah, but look at what we've already accomplished. If we can keep going like this, imagine what else we'll be able to achieve." And with that, they turned back to the crowd, ready to continue the fight, for themselves, for each other, and for everyone who deserved a fair shot at justice.